As soon as the economic stimulus or recovery plan passes, I would hope that President Obama would, in the White House itself, and the Recovery and Renewal Council, and obviously, Bruce, he's gone along the lines already of producing something that fits with your recommendation. That's an important body. But in the end, and all of you know this, anybody who's dealt with the federal government knows it, if something's going to move, it has to move in the White House. It has to move in the White House. President-elect Obama did a wonderful thing on climate change by appointing Cal Browner to coordinate all of the climate change efforts that touch on so many different departments. We ought to appoint someone like that on infrastructure in the White House, because infrastructure involves 5, 6, 7 different federal departments: Commerce, EPA, Energy, of course, transportation. So many different things are rolled into what infrastructure involves, and we should have that type of control and that type of mission in the White House. And we should begin planning on how are we going to deal with this country's infrastructure funding gap. And Bruce is right. On the one hand, we have increased funding to infrastructure, but on the other hand, it's piddling. When Dwight David Eisenhower left office, 12.5% of the domestic non-military spending in this country was devoted to infrastructure. Today, it's less than 2.5%. We devote about 1/7 of our GDP to infrastructure compared to the EU, and a minuscule fraction compared to China, India, Spain, nations like that, who are making major investments in infrastructure. And virtually everything we do in life, education, energy, communications, all revolves around, are we going to have a first-class infrastructure for this country? The American Society of Civil Engineers says we have a $1.6 trillion infrastructure gap, and that's just to properly maintain and repair and maintain what we have. That's not talking about building an inner-city rail system. It's not talking about any new giant projects. I tested that. I asked all of my department heads to give me an idea of what our infrastructure gap was in Pennsylvania. We're normally about 5% of the nation, Pennsylvania. Interestingly, without any coaching, it came back from all of my cabinet secretaries that we had an $80 billion infrastructure gap. For those of you who aren't quick mathematicians, eerily, $80 billion is 5% of $1.6 trillion. So I think the American Society of Civil Engineers is fairly right on.